back porch. We're getting in the holiday mood here. It's not very long until Thanksgiving, and I'm not a dessert person. I rarely make dessert. I'm not a baker. I never make bread except for biscuits and cornbread. But around the holiday time, I start wanting to make pies, and I really only do it once a year. But I have a couple of really good low-carb recipes, and I can eat these while folks who don't watch carbs can eat their apple pie or whatever else they like. To have your pie, you need to start with a really good pie crust. And I'm going to make for you the 3-2-1 basic pie crust. That's 3 cups of flour, 2 sticks of butter, and 1 cup of ice water. And I make that one because it's easy to remember since I only make them once a year. So I'll come right back and we will make a pie crust. Okay, we're having a noisy, busy time here today, so just ignore any noise you hear, including the piggy sounds. So we're going to make a basic pie crust, and a couple of things you need to do to make your pie crust successful is you need to have things cold. The reason you want things cold is because you want to not release the gluten, and you want to have the butter or the lard, whichever you're using, stay in chunks. So, because that's what makes your flakes. So I have ice water. I have half of my butter out of the refrigerator. Just took it out. The other half is still in. And I have sifted my flour, and I'm going to measure out 3 cups. I think I've sifted enough to get 3 cups. If not, I'll sift some more. And that is something I was always taught. You always sift, and you sift before you measure. You actually do get a different volume. It's not hugely different, and it probably wouldn't make that much difference in pie crust. But in baking, generally, you sift before you measure. So, and you overfill and then level off. And we also add about a half teaspoonful of salt. I'm going to mix that around. Now, the ingredients you need are 3 cups of all-purpose flour. You can use pastry flour. You don't have to. I've never used pastry flour. People tell me it's possible to get a flakier crust with it. I never see pastry flour in the store. As I say, I don't bake a lot. If I did, I would try it. But I've always used all-purpose. 2 sticks of butter. And that's, each stick is 4 ounces. So if you want to use 8 ounces of lard instead, you can. Lard makes great pie crust, very flaky pie crust. Butter gives it a different taste, so it's really up to you. I like butter in pie crust, but I have done it with lard. It's wonderful to work with, but as I say, I get a little bit better flavor from the butter. So that's all mixed in. Now, I have used my hands to do this, and I have used a pastry cutter to do it. Whichever way, the pastry cutter it keeps the warmth of your hands out of the mix. And so you want to do that as much as you can. So I have the flour and the salt, and I'm going to start cutting the butter in. And this will take some time. You're not going to have to watch the whole thing, but you're aiming at the end, or you're aiming before we add any liquid, to have the butter cut into the flour and have it in little pea-sized chunks. You're wanting to get the butter equally mixed throughout, so that when you get your final pie crust, it's going to have little tiny pieces of butter suspended in the flour mixture. And that will make your flakes. That will make the light, flaky texture that most folks want. Now, all pie crust, you don't always want a really flaky texture. If I'm making a chicken pot pie, I want one that's just a little bit tougher. And some folks, when they make a cobbler, a regular crusted cobbler, want to have one of the crust a little doughy so that it makes dumplings. But for a pie crust, flaky is good. There goes my one little dog. That's Bessie. She's 4 pounds of fierce. If you'll notice, I'm clearing this pastry cutter, with a fork and not with my hands. Trying to avoid the heat of my hands. I actually watched another YouTube video on making a pie crust the other day, because as I said, I only do this once a year, and so I look around and get ideas from other people. And there's another video I'm going to recommend to you. It's a little bit different pie crust, but the lady does a really good job, and she makes beautiful pies. The channel is Hands That Cook, and I was really impressed with her results, and she does a really good tutorial. So if you're looking around, I mean, I'm not telling you to leave me, but if you're looking around for some different pie crust videos and ideas, that's a good one. Okay, now that may be mixed about as much as we can get that amount of butter, but I'm gonna do it just a little bit more before I get the other half of the butter. Okay, let's get the rest of our butter. Be right back. Okay, adding a little more. Hear my rooster? You know, making a pie crust too is a state of mind. You can't be in a hurry. You need to be gentle and tender with it. The results are worth it. And I'm starting to see the butter mix pretty evenly through, because that's the whole purpose of this, is to get your butter mixed or distributed, not mixed really, because you want to have little chunks. So to have it pretty evenly distributed. I don't know if you can see the texture that we're getting. We have some fairly large chunks, and we have some that are distributed throughout and are kind of small. We're going to mix a little more. This is the last of our butter. Okay, I think we're ready to add our liquid, and I say that because I have butter chunks all through it. Some of them are a little bit bigger than the size of a pea, but not much, and some of them are very, very small. And if you can see, I hope you can see. I'm going to check the camera to make sure you can see. If you can see, it's kind of pebbly looking. Probably should have started with a bigger bowl. Okay, now I have here a cup of water. The ice is now melted in it, but it's very, very cold. It's a cup of ice water with 1 tablespoonful of apple cider vinegar. And that helps with the lightness and the flakiness. I don't know why, I don't know the science, but I know that it does. So I'm going to add the water a bit at a time, about 1/3 maybe, and then 1/3, and mix it well. And there have been times when I didn't use all of the water because I got the texture I was looking for with less water. I swear I think it depends on the weather. But our goal here is to get it wet throughout. But we don't want to mix the butter in too much. We just want to get it so that it'll hold together. Now sometime later, in a week or so, I'm going to make some fried pies. And when I make the fried pies, I will work it a little bit more because I will want them to hold together a little bit differently. I'll actually get them and work them with my hands because I don't want them so flaky. I want them to stay together. Okay, here's the last of the water. And if I need a little bit more, I will put it in, but I don't think I'm going to. Because I think that we are just about moist throughout. Okay, let me move some of this out of the way. We're not ready to roll this out to make our pie yet, but we want to form it up into 2 balls. Make sure we get the rest of the flour in it. Sorry, I've moved it and you can't see what I'm doing. Notice this is the first time I've touched it. I want to get it all holding together. I'm not kneading it. I'm just getting it together. Okay, now what I've got here, is enough for 2 crusts. If you were making a 2 crust pie, this would be for that. I'm going to make 2. Gotta turn my timer off. I'm going to make 2 1 crust pies. And so I'm going to break this in half. Or cut it in half. Notice it's still very rough. This is not all blended together. I'm going to eyeball that. I think that's about half and half. I'm going to wrap each of these halves in a piece of plastic wrap, cling wrap, and put it in the fridge and not fool with it for at least an hour. And I'll come back in an hour and show you the crust. Okay, we're back. And we've let our pie crust chill for an hour. And overnight is okay. And what we're going to do now is make one of the crust. I'm making 2 pies, but I'm making different kinds of pies. So I'm leaving the other one in the refrigerator until I get ready to make the other pie crust. Because we'll make it right. We'll make the crust right before we start to make the pie. So, let's break this out and see how it goes. I'm not the very best in the world at rolling pie crust, by the way. So, you'll just bear with me and we'll hope it's good. Couple of things about making custard pies, because we're going to make custard pies. Custard pies, if you're not careful, end up with a soggy crust. And even if you are careful, sometimes they end up with a soggy crust. But in order to try to keep the crust from being soggy, there are a couple things you can try. And we're going to do them all here tonight. One is, set your pie pan on a metal pan, because that will heat up and help cook the crust underneath to keep it from getting soggy and cook it quick. The other thing is when you make your crust, you can brush it with melted butter and then put it in the refrigerator. And that little bit of butter will cool and make a kind of a shield between the custard filling and the pie crust, and give it a chance to heat up and kind of will sizzle the bottom crust and help it be crunchy. I'm not sure you can see. I'll get the camera in on this in a minute when I get through rolling. You can see the little chunks of butter in this crust. Not yet. And you can feel that the crust is cold. And I'm turning the crust more than I'm turning my rolling pan to make sure that the crust is not stuck as I'm going. And here we are. I believe we've got a nice circle. I do want to show you the texture so that you can see the tiny little hopefully you can see the little beads of butter that have been flattened out. Because we were very careful not, sorry for all the movement, we were very careful not to let it melt as we were making our pie. So hopefully this is not stuck and it'll roll up very easily, hopefully. As I say, I am just simply not the best at this. I'm not a very patient cook, not patient enough to be a really good baker. Make it loose. Now when you're spreading this out, it's very important that you not stretch it across the bottom, because it will, if you stretch it and make it too tight, as it bakes, it'll pull away. So give it plenty of play. And see that the weight of the pie crust is making that stretch. And all of that, and I need to move it over a little. Need a little more. Okay, I think we're okay, we're going to cut a little skirt off. Make it as close to even as you can. Doesn't have to be perfectly even. I'm going to put this back in the fridge, by the way, because I may need some more in crust on my second pie. And I'll want that to not get warm and have the butter melt. Okay. Turn the flap under. Now, however you want to fix the edge of your pie crust, you need just a little bit of a flap turned under. Okay, now let's see how we can do this. Just 2 fingers here, 1 there. 2 fingers here, 1 there. All the way around. Flour my fingers. And it gets a little difficult because my type of plates have handles. And I rarely get this perfect. Well, I never get this perfect. But turning the flap under helps. Getting a little flour on my fingers. If you hear some strange noises, it's because this is Halloween night and the neighbors are having the neighborhood party. So there are children everywhere. Some of them 6 feet tall. Okay, not perfect, but not bad. That's my flute. Now, I have melted butter here. And I'm going to brush the inside of the crust. And as I said, this is to try to keep the crust from getting gummy, from having a custard pie. And I'm going to refrigerate this. And in another video, we will actually make the pie. But there you go, a fluted pie crust. Oh, and it's in a glass bowl, the glass pan. That's the other thing that helps keep the crust crispy. Either a dark pan, metal pan, or a glass pan helps keep your crust from getting soggy on the bottom. So that's the standard 3-2-1 pie crust. We're making 2 of these, and later on I'll show you how we make the egg custard and the buttermilk pie that we're going to put in these. Thank you for joining us on Debbie's Back Porch.